We are just about to start. All right, so thank you for attending today, this event on the fourth day of the 8th Annual Startup Boston Week. I'm Harish, and I will continue to be your host for today. Huge thanks to Suffolk University Sawyer Business School for hosting this conference for the second consecutive year. Suffolk University hosts a lot of great opportunities for learning, both inside and outside of these classrooms, and we really appreciate their partnership in hosting this conference for us. The goal behind Startup Boston Week is to connect the entire Greater Boston and New England startup community across all industries, all startup departments, all bootstrapped and funding stages for 5 days of learning and connecting with one another. The team that creates Startup Boston Week is primarily volunteer, and all the folks running the conference today are volunteering their time as well. So thank you for attending this conference, and we appreciate the role you're playing in shaping our startup community. Thanks once again for attending, and I will pass it on to the speakers now.
Everyone. Thank you so much for coming to this session. I'm excited to be here. First, let me share a little bit about myself. My name is Tamara Mengi. I am the newly minted Executive Director for the Career and Experiential Learning Center at Curry College. But the reason why I'm here today is that most of my higher ed professional career has been at MIT, being part of the ecosystem there, helping students when they're thinking about startups, careers, connecting them, making those relationships that are important. And so I'm excited to be here today to hear about all the things these wonderful individuals have accomplished and can offer to you all as tips and advice. But let me tell you a little bit about how this is going to go. We've come up with some questions already set up to ask, and then we're going to open the floor for you as well. So please do plan to have some questions. And before we get started, I just want to get a sense of the audience. I don't want to make assumptions. Curious, how many of you are currently students? Okay. Great. And the rest, should I assume, are in the startup world already? All right. Well, thank you. I asked that so that the audience information can help the speakers in how they respond to the questions. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to our first panelist, Amrit, and ask him to introduce himself. Each of the panelists will share a little bit more than their titles here, about 30 seconds each, and then we're going to go into the Q&A. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamara. I'm Amrit Chaudhary. I'm a multi-time entrepreneur in the Boston area, mostly in life sciences and biotech. By training, I'm a synthetic protein chemist and bioengineer. Out of Boston University, I spun off my first company in 2007 based on protein chemistry research and built that and ran that for a number of years. And from 2014 until the beginning of 2024, for about a decade, I built and ran an organization working on scaled infrastructure and pharmaceutical resourcing called Smart Labs. And that company had an opportunity to grow it internationally, 1 million square feet of labs, $400 million raised, $1 billion deployed, partner capital. So I've gone through the seed stage, Series A, all the way through to growth commercialization. So both on the drug side and on the tools and infrastructure you need to make drugs. That's me. And today I am happily semi-retired.
That's going to be hard to follow. I'm Sal Darji. I am a longtime product manager. I worked for ed tech and fintech companies. About a year and a half ago, I was laid off. And when I was looking, I found a position at Northeastern's tech transfer office, where I've been a spin-out consultant for a year and a half. So this is not my first exposure to startups, since I was a product manager and also a consultant at many different startups over my career. I've been helping accelerate Northeastern spin-out companies out of the lab and into the market for this past year and a half, and it's been kind of a crazy wild ride. I'm really excited to be able to present some of what I've learned over the past year and a half to this audience and add to the conversation. So thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Nita. I'm the CEO and founder of a digital mental health software. We use neuroscience and AI models to create more precise mental health interventions and then more effective treatments. I was an undergraduate studying neuroscience at Northeastern, and most of my work was in the lab, making sure that we can use data to make mental health treatments smarter. And I had worked in the hospital and then later on worked in consulting, And my work in the lab, in the hospital, in consulting really told me a lot about, what mental health and what data can do to the industry. And so most of my work as CEO has been transferring our core technology, which is IP spinned out from Northeastern University. So I've been looking at our core technology and making it into a commercial business. And I'm really happy to share what I've learned. I'm an early stage founder, and it's been a great journey. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Emre Bektik. I'm a research fellow at Harvard Medical School. My research is mostly focused on cardiovascular disease and health. So we are exploring how diabetes, which is a metabolic disease, how it affects actually cardiometabolic health. So this is more of the basic research. Actually, we are trying to understand the molecular mechanisms of the disease. So it's very fundamental research. So on the other side, I'm a co-founder of Healthify, which is a digital health tech startup focused on helping diabetes patients manage their symptoms better using digital tools and AI. So we are at the pre-seed stage, currently incubating in Harvard Innovation Labs. So we're looking forward to get some initial funding to expand our prototype and develop better versions. So we have the initial version right now, but that needs more money to actually expand into a better prototype. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all. So with that, I'm going to ask our first question, and feel free, anyone, to jump in and answer whichever ones you want to answer. Our first one's going to be, how did your academic background influence your entrepreneurial mindset and approach?
I can go with that. So studying neuroscience, it was working with a lot of unknowns. The neuroscience industry isn't something that really has a really clear path. And so I was, used to working with a lot of unknowns and used to, making do with what I have. And I think that's something that I really took into my journey as an entrepreneur, trying to read research and trying to read market research and make it into meaningful insights.
So I started off a little bit of an unusual lifestyle. When I was really young, I grew up in Cambridge, and my parents were both academics in the area. And I had been working in a lab since I was 15. I was the youngest paid researcher at the Whitehead Institute. It was an unusual, crazy opportunity. And then I went to undergrad and studied bioengineering. And so for me, by the time I was finishing the undergrad, I already had 7 years of working in a lab. And so from there, I looked at my career path and thought, do I go down a PhD or an MD or some other graduate school? And I realized that to run my own lab and be in charge of research would take 20 years between the PhD, the fellowship, the postdoc, the associate professorship, and then tenure. And I thought, hey, how do I go and run a lab today? And I didn't know what I was doing when I started my first company, and somehow got funding, and it was 2007, so a little different funding environment. And it was a completely different learning experience. Knowing the science is very important, and I worked directly in the type of science that I had a background in, but you really, they're the principles of business, but then there's the application and execution of business. And they're two very, very different things. And so it was a tremendous learning that I had to have in the first 2 years of running a business.
I can go next, I think. I have a quite actually similar background. So I came from completely academic setting. So until last 3 years, I was completely academic, and my mindset was completely academic. I just want to publish papers, promote my position into higher positions, and eventually start up my own lab. But I realized it was actually a big challenge, and the market for academics is shrinking as independent academics. So I thought I should build my secondary option. It could be either industry or something else. So I came across with a lot of people who I discussed with about entrepreneurship, starting up businesses. That's somehow the equivalent of having your own lab, actually. You're having your own company, building something from scratch. And you need to raise a lot of fundings. But I just realized at that moment that academic mindset is completely different than entrepreneurial mindset. So it is different than you want to publish something or you want to explore something unknown and you want to improve the knowledge in the field. So in entrepreneurial mindset is completely different. So you want to build an innovation that can be commercialized, that can bring revenues, and also actually directly contributes to the society. It just doesn't increase, it doesn't directly increase the knowledge in the field, but also expands into the society and directly helps, contributes. So my background was academic, but I think was very helpful as a technical founder. So you need the knowledge to build your minimum product first. And so to build that product, you need the technical knowledge before the business skills. Mm-hmm. So that's why I'm happy that actually I have been through all this academic career. So I had the confidence to build something myself. Definitely, yeah, it'll be very helpful to have the academic background, even in entrepreneurial, completely entrepreneurial career.
Thank you.
Yep.
As I explained, my background is a little bit different, but right now, like I'm supporting academic entrepreneurs, and I think what Emery said is correct, which is that you know, if we didn't have people like Emery and the folks at this table working on science, then a lot of this innovation would be locked in the labs, and so this is a really essential function, and I'm really happy to be on this panel.
Thank you. Let's see. I'm curious to hear, how can, for those of you who've done the academic research, how can your academic research be involved into a marketable product or service? And what steps are involved in the process?
So I'm happy to talk about that. To be very honest, the majority of time, the focus of your academic research isn't what you end up doing in the industry. So let's say that I was a protein chemist working on endocrinology, right? That doesn't mean that I have to go and start an endocrinology company and a therapeutic company in that space. Or if I was working on a technology like CRISPR-Cas9 and gene editing, it might not be the best person to go and develop that commercially. I think what's important is that the purpose of at least scientific academic training is, one, to deeply explore and understand mechanisms of the world, but then to teach you how to think and logically understand how to structure that exploration. And I think that's the most important part coming out of academia, is that actual training of how to think. Once you have that, once you have a molecular biology background or a bioengineering background or something else, and you want to go into a technical startup, two things happen, and I see this a lot. One, you might have a great new innovation, we were talking about this earlier, a great new innovation out of your lab. You get into the hammer and nail problem, where you really want to use that specific finding to go and create a solution. And sometimes what you discover just doesn't work. And people get tied to it, very, very like anchored to it, because they think that's the only value they bring to the table, is that you're the founder of this technology or the inventor of this technology. I think the actual issue is finding the market need, trying to use your technology to solve that, being willing to abandon that technology if it's not solving that, and then looking at other people's technology to utilize. And I think that's the actual industry training that a lot of people get when they go to a pharma company or other organizations. And that's actually how most drugs are commercialized. The IP coming out of a university is almost never the IP that's used in the drug, 95% of the time. But it helps you start that process in that direction.
One thing I can say definitely that you mentioned is finding a use case. I mean, one thing that's always helped me is that people don't really need a 3-foot drill, they need the hole. And so you have a technology, you need to find a use case. And the only way to do it is by talking to people. I remember, so our technology is digital phenotyping, and the first, prototype was having a wearable device. And then we found out that people don't want to wear more wearables, and we had to abandon, months of prototyping a wearable device. And your idea would constantly evolve, but what makes it evolve to be a better product is if you're actually talking to customers and looking for the customers and looking for the buyers, especially. A lot of scientists have beautiful research, but there's nobody that really wants to buy research. That's not the product. You have to find someone that would buy research. So I really like what you said about finding a way to use your research to fuel that technology and not being really tied to the idea of that research in particular.
Yeah, I mean, again, as I said, the academic mindset is completely different, right? So not every academic research is intended for innovation and commercial value. It doesn't have commercial value always. Sometimes the field is building up, So 10 years back, I was working on this particular technology where we converted the cell type called fibroblast into beating cardiomyocytes. So it was a novel technology back then, 10, 15 years ago. And since then, has been a lot of research done on this particular subject. And right now, I think it just starts having that enough knowledge to start something, building some really viable product to commercialize. So I think academic process is long, is not always intended for our industry, but definitely it helps actually. This is a lengthy process that builds up the knowledge so that you can convert, and you can consider converting that into a viable product in the industry actually. So it's not always intended for industrial capacity.
Yeah, as a product manager, you're often given like a green field where you start by going and talking to your potential customers and trying to figure out what the problem is. And with this type of research, you're not starting with a greenfield. You're starting with a lot of science, sometimes decades of science. It's a very long road. And so that's essentially the challenge, which is it's very different than working in software, for example, where you're talking to customers. In order to take it and to find a use case where you need to be open and flexible, and as Amrit said, often the research that you start out with may not be included in the final product, but it's at least directionally correct and gets you started on that venture climb.
So I'm hearing, you're working with a lot of unknowns. Academia is a lot different than business. You had to build the business skills when you made this leap, right? So I'm thinking we've covered some of this, but the question that we had planned was, what are the most significant challenges you've encountered and how you overcome them? Are there any other challenges that you would like to highlight and how you overcame them that would be useful for folks in the same kind of capacity here, thinking about startups and making transitions?
I think the biggest challenge is putting out a product that you don't think is perfect. And I think it happens with a lot of academia and academic research, that the research is very, very strong. Translating that into a product would have to take many iterations. And because you are a scientist, the idea of putting out something that's not perfect is like the worst thing that could happen to you. And you just have to put it out. You just have to put it out, and you have to let the market guide the final product. I think with research, you go to the final stage on your own. You're studying on your own, but this time you have to put something out and let the market tell you what the final product would look like.
This is just my experience in helping out spin-out companies, but in my opinion, maybe one of the challenges that scientific entrepreneurs have is being able to commit their time and being able to commit to the company that they're starting. And the reason for that is that academia tends to be pretty stable. You've got a paycheck every day, or you get paid. It's a very stable environment. Convincing professors or others to go down this venture road, there's a lot of risk. And so I think that's one of the biggest challenges. And what you see is a lot of ventures being created and born, but then there's not many that can take it and commit. And so, Nita, I'd love to hear your perspective on that as well, because I know you took a big leap.
Yes, I did. So after my undergraduate career, I ended up working in life science consulting. And it was really nice because I was doing the things I was doing. I was helping go to market for life science companies, and I was running my atlas. And it was a horrible schedule. I would wake up at 6 a.m. Consulting is deadly. And, I'm working till 12. After that, I'm working on the startup till like 3 a.m. It was horrible. Funny enough, the startup, I was testing the prototype at that time, and our basic thing is being able to track and monitor your mental health. And I remember one of our data scientists messaged me like, I think there might be something wrong with our code. Like, it's saying you're sleeping only 3 hours. And I was like, no, actually the code is working really well. And so I had to take the big leap to quit my full-time job. I quit my full-time job. I was in San Francisco, and I moved here actually like 3 months ago, and I decided to be a full-time founder. Really early in my career, I'm not American, as some of you might hear, so I'm an international student, so it comes with a lot of risks, but the best bet you can do is bet on yourself. And I think that's a lot of things that academic researchers really need to focus on, is that bet on yourself and taking ownership of your mind and your startup.
Great, thank you. Sal, something you said leads perfectly into what the next question was, and I'm sensing all of you might be able to answer this. How can aspiring entrepreneurs deal with skepticism, whether it's from the stakeholders, academia, others that are involved in the pursuit of a startup? How did you manage that? What advice do you have for folks dealing with skepticism?
So I have probably a controversial take on it. Skepticism from academia doesn't matter at all. They're not people who work in industry for the most part. So of course, people are going to be risk averse, and unless your idea is technologically really bad, or like you're going to go invent, an iPhone for a monkey, like something a really bad idea. I think it's hard because you can't get meaningful feedback from a client perspective, investor perspective, people who build product perspective, until you go out and talk to people in industry and in the investment industry, in the startup community, and in the actual development community, in the industry that you work in. So I think that's part one. I think that it's really hard if you've done nothing but academia and then go and build a company to get credibility and funding, because there are a lot of non-obvious things that are part of building a company that you just don't have experience in, and somebody's taking a bet on you, right? With their own money or with the capital they're entrusted to manage. Things like, okay, what's your HR policy? How good a manager are you? How good are you at identifying and recruiting talent? Are you good at financial management? Are you able to go and understand your runway and what prudent spending looks like, and how you deal and pivot with cutting budgets or doing a layoff? The legal aspects of it, everything about running a business still exists, whether you're building a therapeutic company, a product, a software company, whatever it is. And so I had to just give you an example. I thought about building my company when I was 20, and I was a junior. And my dad was a scientist and had been in academia most of his life. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about this. What do you think? And he referred me to a friend of his who was a business professor. So every year, every Friday, I went and had lunch with this professor, and I was like, teach me to write a P&L, teach me to write a business plan, and just as a favor. And I got to go and ask questions of this person from a completely different industry around what investors look for, what banks look for, how funding works, what return on investment means. I have friends who are starting new companies. I have a friend who's trying to start one in science, and they identified a really big problem in commercial research. And I said, great. When an investor gives you $30 million to build that idea out, how much money do they get back and when? No answer, right? Do they get back 90 million in 7 years? Do they get back 50 million in 2 years? What is that rate of return? And the answer I got back was, well, I don't actually even know if it's possible to fix this problem. And I said, well, who's going to give you money? This is not academic research. This is, I'm giving you money to make a return on investment with hopefully the lowest risk or the highest potential return, and there's a balancing act between the two. And so I think that's where you have to prove yourself the most in the face of skepticism. There's always going to be skepticism in the marketplace, around the product, from the academic community. I think if you don't have the money, you can't do anything. And so working on the skills you need to provide other people the confidence that you can go and be a good shepherd of that capital, and that you know how to run basic business, and you're not going to get sued for employment law or sued for something else. That's what people look for.
Could I agree wholeheartedly with that, but I would also say that like the skepticism is never, or generally not about the science, right? Because the people who are bringing forward the science are experts in this. They've spent possibly decades working on it. So it's not about the science. It's really about the ability to execute. And so dealing with the skepticism is really building up those skills necessary to bring a company forward.
Yeah, I think I love skepticism. I think criticism is good. I think it's always nice. I mean, right now I'm at the stage where I would look for anyone to criticize me because it makes me a better founder. And when people are skeptical, it's always nice to figure out the source of the skepticism, because then you can target it head on. I mean, like if they're skeptic about you making money, target it head on. And I think your experience, going to ask people how to do certain things is how to build yourself as a founder. And when people are skeptical, it just means you haven't figured something out and you need to figure something out. And it's a really, really easy, like, if they don't believe you, prove. If you can't prove, find a way to do it,
And I think I totally agree. Actually, I love skepticism as well. Because a lot of academics are already skeptical, actually. Oftentimes you talk to a lot of academic folks, they will say, some of them even don't believe it's possible to start up something by yourself. They only think there is academia versus industry. There is nothing in between you can do. So a lot of folks I talk, research fellows, students, they were like, is it even possible to start up something? So I think it just starts in like lack of knowledge in your mind makes it like it's impossible. So once you break that barrier and you want to start something, then more skepticism is coming from other people. It's like when you jump into startup world, people will judge your team. Is this team is really a good team that can succeed on the business that you are planning? Or do you have an IP protection? If not, how is it even possible that you can, raise funding or build this business successfully? So skepticism will never end. It will be from beginning to end. I think even if you're a completely successful company, like maybe Moderna or Vertex here, people will be still skeptical. They will be judging like, you are successful now, but how about next 5 years or 10 years? So that's a good point, because people will tell you all the negative things. So you have a chance to fix the problems. If that's a real problem, it's actually your responsibility to fix that problem. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm going to take a different path now with the next question. Would love you to share, how did you approach technology transfer and intellectual property considerations when transitioning from research to startup?
I would mention Sal here actually has been really, really nice help for me. And I think most of it is just asking for help. I don't think it's anything that a founder really knows innately how to solve these problems. So just asking for it and making sure you have everything documented from the beginning, and knowing exactly what your technology is, what the benefit is to your company. I definitely can speak as a founder, we have two universities, Northeastern and the University of Minnesota, that are contributors to our technology. And because it's an algorithm, it's really hard to differentiate than most hardware. So you have to be really, really clear on what the technology is and understanding the benefit to your company. And when you talk about benefit, it's not just about the benefit to the product, but also the financial benefits. And so you need to understand what having that technology does to your strategy and what it translates to in dollars.
Yeah, I'm a consultant for the Center for Research Innovation at Northeastern University, which is Northeastern's tech transfer office, and I help Northeastern spin out, ventures with intellectual property go to market, and my Atlas is one of those spin outs. And my recommendation is that if you're working within an academic lab, is to work with your university's tech transfer office, and to, I think that there's sometimes some general skepticism, or companies or teams which may want to sidestep the intellectual property and licensing process. I definitely do not believe that. I really think that these tech transfer offices are great resources, and to help you protect your intellectual property, and to help accelerate these ventures and bring them to market. This is the system that we have that works in this country to bring innovation and new technologies to market, and I feel that really should work within those constraints and so, like, to answer the question directly, if you're working within a university or a research university, work with your tech transfer office, and they all have different pathways. This is a well-trodden path, easy. Usually they try to make it easy to understand. It starts with the innovation disclosure forms. So.
I'm going to be the contrary perspective here, only because of my own experience. My first company was built on advanced synthetic protein chemistry and immunology. My last company innovated by working on infrastructure engineering, software development, and operational optimization, and drug development methodologies. And for all of these, I did zero tech transfer out of university. It was all know-how around the technical skills that I had applied in a different way than any of the research that I had done previously. And so you have to really look at, am I taking what I built in an academic setting, and am I using that actual intellectual property to build a product around it, or did I learn how to do things such that I can go and work on a different problem in the industry space that I might find value in?
Maybe slightly expanding on what Amrit said, actually. So if what you're building if it is completely outside academia, if it is not a spin-out, but an independent company that you're building on the side, maybe, so you need to have a different approach of intellectual property. So oftentimes people start building something before they even realize there is already a patent on that. So tech transfer offices have very good knowledge about what is patentable, what is not. But if you're an independent researcher or if independent founder, so you may not know exactly if this is a patentable product that you're building. So maybe it's a good idea to go through a lot of patenting websites like Google Patents and see if something has been already built. If not, or maybe if there are similar things, but you are adding up something onto what is available in the market, it's a good idea to talk to lawyers and get suggestions.
On a completely non-topic, apologies, but just made me think about it. When you are in science, building a scientific product that is involved in research, and you're taking it out of a university or academic setting, one of the things that you don't even realize is how important access to knowledge is. You no longer have access to journals. It costs like tens of thousands of dollars a year to be able to go and look up something in Nature or Science or whatnot. So all of a sudden you're sitting there and you're like, wait a minute, I just left the university. I no longer have access to this or legal access to this. Holy crap. How do I go and do research without any funding? Like, these are the things you don't think about when you first step out.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits to working within university, and if you're in the university, then the IP belongs to the university. So it's best to work within the system. But if you're outside, then yes, you're going to have to do a lot of work to figure out how to protect your innovation.
We have a couple more questions that I've got prepared, and then we're going to open up to you all. So the next is, what did you find most surprising between your expectation and the reality of starting a startup? And
I say this to people who are close friends. I think that in order to be an entrepreneur, you have to be fearless and stupid. That's just it. You have to be completely confident about your ability to execute, so much so that that confidence leaks onto everybody you talk about, whether it's a funder, a co-founder, a partner, or employees you're trying to hire, or people you're trying to convince that your idea has value. And you'd be stupid because you're signing up for more work than you've ever had in your life, ever. Like 80-hour weeks for years. And no, consultants do that a lot. So, I guess if you're coming from that industry, it's status quo. But, if you're really committing to something, it is really hard to have to keep pivoting, worry about financials, be completely scared about where funding is coming from, be rejected by clients. You just have to persevere through a lot and be able to have that even keel steadiness through that process. And it's actually, I'm most impressed by people who've done a company that has either succeeded or failed and do another company because they actually know what they're signing up for. And my joke is that you need enough time in between those two activities that you forget how bad the first 3 years are. Enough time to refresh and reset.
One thing I would definitely stress on is organization. As a founder, you're going to be moving between many, many roles. And I think that's very different from what we're used to working in industry where you just have one thing you're doing. You have to be everyone all at once. And the only thing that can really help you is organization. And I think to be able to balance everything, you have to balance your high-end vision and your small-end vision. So a big vision would be, changing the mental health care industry. But my short-end vision is getting a product out and being able to effectively manage the two of them and also tell your team of the two of them, because you need people who see your vision and also would deal with the small steps you take every single day to make that vision. So you almost have to be, as you put it really well, very, very stupid in a way where you have this high vision that nobody could believe in, but that's what you see. And I think that's what makes you wake up in the morning and face the unknown.
Yeah, I can tell two things. I think the first one is, so a lot of folks in the beginning, they think they're going to build something, it's going to be successful, and they will make millions of dollars of revenue, and then they'll be rich. But in reality, actually, majority of the founders are suffering in their first 3 to 5 years. Lack of money, lack of finances, you're reconsidering whether you should continue doing really entrepreneurship or not, especially if you have a family to take care. So, and if you don't have a full-time job, so oftentimes it's a financial challenge for entrepreneurs. So if you take that big risk, you're good to go. If not, I think it's gonna really torture you. Also, the second thing is, so in the beginning I was thinking the level of tolerance to failure was same in academia versus entrepreneurship, but it was different. So in academia, if you fail a project, people's perspective on you will be, you're a bad scientist or you're not a good academic. So you're not much tolerated in the large scale. But in entrepreneurship, each failure is a learning process. So they don't judge you why you failed. If you have a good reason, good excuse, maybe like you had an amazing idea, you came to the stage of customer discovery, and you realize that there is not enough customers that can buy your product. So you pivot, or you maybe shut down the company, start something else. Nobody will say, why did you shut that company up, and then you're moving to another one. So it won't be a bad point in your CV. So it's like you have this experience, it's a plus. And with that experience, you come and start something else, which actually makes sense because you are getting stronger. As you fail, you get stronger. So each failure is teaching you a lot of things, right?
I wanted to say something that you reminded me. So when I was going to transition into being a full-time founder, I remember asking my advisor, like, what job opportunities are there for a failed CEO? And he laughed so much because many, there are many things to do. It's about taking the big jump. And, I don't think there's really failure in the startup business because you're always learning. And if you put that perspective on, it's easy to power through anything.
I love the last two insights. What I've heard someone call that before is failing forward, and how important that is that we fail forward. This has been really rich. You've covered so much of the questions that I was planning to ask. So I think I'm going to take a moment and open. But Sal, did you have something before I launch into that?
I was just to say, like, on that topic, like working with academic founders, I think that what people don't fail to realize is that how hard it is. And my former coworker, who's now at Mass Ventures, Myron Casaraba, he said that it's a venture climb, and I really like that metaphor because it's very, very difficult to climb with your and get through the different stages of a startup. And so I think that's where the expectations are sometimes that it's going to be a little bit easy, that you're going to find your product market fit and get to market, but it's actually much harder with a much higher failure rate than people expect.
Thank you. With that, I'm going to take a pause and see if there are any questions in the audience, or Harish, if you have any in the chat. I'm not sure if there are any that came in from our folks joining us online. Any questions? Oh, we have a few here.
Okay, hi. So first of all, thank you for this discussion. My question is, how do you approach investors? Because normally, I mean, unlike normal startups, deep tech startups, they need more iterations and more pivoting, and they kind of like more risk, but hopefully more promise. So how do you get investors, basically?
I can take this one. I used to do a fellowship in a deep tech VC. So I used to go through a lot of decks from deep tech companies. And I think one thing is really, really good clarity with your vision. And, you might not have, traction in terms of, customers, because it does take a long time. But if you're clear with your strategy to entering the market, you're clear with your milestones. And so when people raise, they usually raise with, 12 months of runway. But for a deep tech company, you have to raise with milestones. I want to accomplish this and this and this, and that would allow me to accomplish this and this. And lay out what you're planning for your future funding, at what milestones that would bring. So even though it's like 10 years in the future, you're very clear on what milestones would reach you to year 10 before you start getting customers.
Gentleman right there.
I'd like to add to that as well, which is that a lot of these startups coming out of academia also have access to things that regular startups may not have. Like they have access to grant funding. We put billions of dollars into the NSF, and the NSF turns that around and gives that to startup companies. We've got America's Seed Fund. This is really important because it's a competitive advantage when you're looking for other investors, right? This grant funding is a huge tailwind for scientific startups, and there's other there's accelerators and incubators that are very friendly towards these startups coming out of labs because they already have something. They have some science. They have IP that you could use. So it's very appealing. It's a step to getting venture capital or other capital to come in. The other aspect of this is if you're bringing hard science to market, it's not just venture capital, there's corporate venture capital, right? So like there's all sorts of avenues towards going into for climate tech, for example, you could go in and you could find climate tech investors or companies with corporate venture capital arms focused on climate tech. So that's like differentiating yourself and targeting who it is that you go after is one approach.
So my question was around, when you're a startup founder coming from academia or this more academic background, I've heard a couple of you mention like there's a lot to learn. You have to constantly be learning, and if it's a skill you don't have, you to develop. How do you think about that balance between, gosh, there's so much I need to do and learn and start doing versus using some of the resources that you have to address those? Like, is it worth your time to become a marketer? I don't like. How do you think about that question and figure out the balancing there?
Yes. In order to be able to hire people who are competent, you need to know something about that field. So whether it's hiring a legal team, an accounting team, a marketing team, a sales process, a commercialization group, whatever you're talking about, IT, you need the minimal understanding of what you're asking them to do, and you need to be able to understand, is the work they're producing quality, right? And if you don't do that, you're going in blind. So it's important to, you don't have to be an expert in this space, use logic, right? But it's important to have exposure and ask people and spend the time investing into understanding each of those things, because any one of those things can break your business.
Yeah. Shortly, I would say use your evenings to learn. After dinner, that's what you do. You use your evenings to learn. And then if you're not really strong in any particular thing, get advisors that would help you and mentors that would actually like kind of succeed for that until you become an expert in that.
I think it's a process, so you're not going to learn everything in a day or a week or a month. So it's a long process. So once you cover the basics and essentials initially, then you gradually learn, and at some point you realize actually you have learned a lot of things. And also you're not alone, so you probably have your own team, you're building that team also. So everyone with different skill sets and knowledge comes in. So you have a collective knowledge. Yeah.
You have a question over there? Could you,
I actually have.
oh, you have one over
Yeah.
there. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So I have a question regarding the process of this from lab to Launchpad. In particular, regarding the institutions, the question probably I will adjust to like a cell. And when you look at this process, when a professor or researcher have something that potential could be commercialized, and I wonder when you look at this whole process, what is the pain point of making it really get to the finding the right commercial partner? And if you, because you work closely with Northeastern, and if you evaluate these whole things, if you want to do something about it, which part that you think most likely is the pain point that you want to take care of it, including evaluation of the idea to eventually valuation of the idea itself. So that's
This is a really tough question to answer. I don't. It's just really difficult to match up innovation and science with like commercial market needs, and I think that process is maybe somewhat broken in this country as well. Like there just isn't a lot of visibility into this very long tail of R1 research universities that we have, into like what are the commercial opportunities and potential available. For the most part, like companies have ceded research to universities and R1 research universities. So like companies aren't doing as much research as they used to do many years ago. The challenge that we have is like figuring out like how, like what commercializable technologies exist within these universities, and to exposing them into the broad marketplace and allowing companies to discover them. And this is the challenge of the marketplace that we have. I mean, there's not just one challenge. It's a very tough. Like I wouldn't say like maybe it is a broken system, but there's some inefficiencies there that we need to solve, and that we're all working on. Right? Like we're trying to make this better.
Hey, so I have a question. As researchers, we're obviously all a little ahead of the game on certain topics. We read and absorb so much more information, and we start to see the patterns before the average human does. How do you balance being too early for something, where everyone around you is like, oh my God, that's a great idea, because we're all experts and we all know the thing. And then you start talking to other people, and when you actually explain it to them, they say, oh, that's great. But before you really go deep, they have no idea what you're talking about. Or they say, okay, yeah, that's kind of cool, but why? You're like, in 10 years, this is going to be a thing. How do you balance that experience?
Go ahead, please.
I was going to say, focus on the problem when you talk to someone and let them ask you how. So if you're talking about something you've discovered or something that you think is novel, don't really talk directly about don't really go into detail about what you're talking about. Still always focus on the problem. And especially with you raise deep tech, most of it would be really valuable in 10 years, but there's still a lot of investment going into it because people know that there's going to be that problem in 10 years and they are going to need a solution immediately. And if you focus on the effect of what you're solving, and then when they ask how, then you say, well, actually, I'm going to tell you how because I know this. I think sometimes the conversation is easier, but I think as people who are researchers, it's hard to tell you to dumb down what you're saying, but sometimes focusing high level can work.
I think that going on that, you can't think about this is cool technology that could change the world. You have to think about this as what is the problem that I'm fixing. A direct example of this, and I'm going to give a very overly simplified and not accurate version of this, so apologies for the technical experts. In 2015, 16, around that time frame, a bunch of companies were founded. I know the founders of one of them. In protein chemistry. And their thesis was, hey, drugs are made out of small molecule and biologics. Most biologics that are in the marketplace are monoclonal antibodies for how you treat disease. And monoclonal antibodies can really work with your immune system or do inhibition. There's a range of capabilities it has as a tool. And because small molecules have a certain level of effect and certain things it can and can't do, biologics at the time in the marketplace have a certain range of effect and things it can't do. In the marketplace, there are diseases where we understand the disease, we know the mechanisms of action, we know what we would need to do to fix the disease, but our tools that we have access to can't fix that. So when protein degradation, using the ubiquitin pathways, became a thing, and that means that instead of going and clamping onto a protein and prohibiting it from acting, you're triggering a response to target protein and degrade it. Never been done before, novel research, competing labs across the country, spinning off technology, spinning off companies. Jay Bradner out of, at the time, Children's, I think, Dana-Farber and Children's, went and built a company around it. And it wasn't, protein degradation's cool, imagine all the things we could do. It was, here's a problem. If we figure out a way of degrading this protein, it would solve the problem. Technologies can't do that, ours can. That's the business. And there were a couple of companies that were started, but Jay started that company and raised, with 0 employees, $700 million.
Could I add to that, this question of timing is maybe the number one success or failure factor. It's really, really important. And there's a ton of examples of why timing is so important, pets.com or Chewy, just matter of timing, same company, but different era. And most recently, I read an article about how small sample testing that is becoming more and more common. And, we have Theranos as an example of failed. So there's a little bit about timing, a little bit about fake science. There's not much you can do about it, right? There's an element of luck if you're there at the right time. So my advice is just to go for it because there's nothing you can do about timing sometimes. It's just what it is. I mean, you just have to, take the cards you've dealt.
Thank you, Sal. We are just under 5 minutes before this panel ends. So to wrap us up, I'm going to ask the panelists, there have been so many things I've learned, I've taken a lot of notes, but is there something that you want to leave folks with that you think is the most important thing that you want to stress? Or, if they left, you're I hope they remember this one thing. I'll hand it over to whoever would like to offer that.
I can start off by talking about user discovery. Try to talk to people who are going to buy your technology without selling to them. Find out what you think their needs are and what their actual needs are. And be an expert in the customer is what I would say.
So one good thing is I think if you're an academic, so definitely it's a very good idea to join some incubators or accelerator programs. They will help you with everything, including the investors. So they have a network of investors they can help. So don't feel like you have to figure out everything by yourself. So get into some good programs that can help you.
If I have to leave with something, it's just go for it, because all of this science and research that we're doing is critical for society, and it brings value to society. And if you're going down this commercialization route, like, this is maybe the most important thing that we're doing. This is the way that we're going to solve a lot of the problems that we have, whether it's like climate or health or other problems. So if you're thinking about going down this route, then do it. There's a lot of support for you, and that would be my parting thought.
So I've been doing this for 17 years, and I will tell you that imposter syndrome never goes away. You always feel underqualified or the wrong person for the job or intimidated by the problem challenge or the people around you. It is easy to find yourself, when you're especially a small company working on a hard problem and not making progress, to feel like you're failing or that people will realize you're not as capable as you thought or project that you are. That is true of everybody at every stage of career. And that doesn't go away. And you have to work on your own mental health and your own self-confidence to be able to get through that, because you need to be able to inspire the people around you. And at the end of the day, businesses succeed because of people, not the technology, not because of some unique discovery or some unique, surprise. The teams that do the best, that get serendipitously lucky, are the ones who are capable and ready for that luck, who are prepared and have the ability to think and process and take advantage of that opportunity. And so the most important people, yourself, your co-founders, your initial team, that is super, super important. And I would rather give, if I was an investor, I would rather give a lot of money to an A+ team with a B- idea than a B- team with an A+ idea every single time.
Well, this has been fantastic. Please join me in thanking our panelists today. We really appreciate everything you've shared. Thank you very much for coming today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions.